here I am, 30 years old. Am I fully recovered? I don't think I would say yes. I think I would say no, I'm not fully recovered. And that's kind of why I named this podcast Recovered-ish, because the ish, heavy on the ish, heavy on the ish. You're listening to the Recovered-ish podcast. I'm your host, Chloe Cox, and yeah, I know a thing or two about eating disorder recovery. Between my own very complicated history with disordered eating and the work I do now, I've seen this thing from pretty much every angle. This podcast is where we talk about the messier parts of recovery that don't really make it online. No platitudes, no inspirational quotes, just the real, raw, sometimes frustrating, sometimes surprisingly liberating process of building a life beyond your eating disorder. Let's get into it. Okay, why do I feel so nervous? I know you guys. It'll be fine. Well, hey, welcome to the Recovered-ish podcast. I'm getting a little bit emotional already. Okay, this podcast has been pretty long in the making. To be honest with you all, I've been thinking about starting a podcast probably for as long as I've been listening to podcasts, which I guess now is probably close to 10, 15 years. I've always been a fan of just sitting in my car, turning on someone interesting, talking about something interesting, something helpful, trying to learn better myself. That's kind of a common theme in my life. And I've always wanted to put one together, but I never really thought I had anything important to say until recently. As many of you know, I am pretty active on my Instagram at Recover with Chloe. If you are interested and haven't stopped by, over the last year, our community there has grown more than I really ever thought possible. I am a therapist. I am in eating disorder recovery for over 10 years now. I also work as a recovery coach. So this is kind of my whole thing. Talking about eating disorder recovery has really become more of a passion than I ever really realized. I mean, when I started recovery, it was obviously from a place of necessity, from a place of being really sick. And I grew into this new version of me through recovery that I never really could have envisioned. So it feels very cool that over the last year, I've connected with so many of you. You've connected with my content. I really hope that a lot of you have felt less alone in seeing some of the crazy thoughts that I've had in my brain that I know some of my clients have had too, and that it appears like thousands of us have had. And so I'm creating the Recovered-ish podcast kind of from that place of we're all kind of in this mess together. And I don't know if it's talked about enough that recovery takes a very freaking long time. It is extremely, extremely difficult and messy, not a straight line, which we hear all the time, so often that it becomes kind of meaningless. But I think we hear too much about the before and the after and not enough about the middle. We hear a lot about what it feels like to be sick. We hear a lot about what it feels like to be in this beautiful recovered place. But the truth is both of those extremes require this middle space. And I want to talk about it. And I think you all do too. So it's really only fitting that we start this podcast journey with a question I get asked truly on the daily on Instagram. And it is the question of whether or not full recovery actually exists, whether or not you can go from a place of being fully entrenched in an eating disorder where it rules your life, where it rules your brain, it rules your body, to never experiencing any sort of disorder, any sort of flavor of eating disorder thought or urge ever again. And if I'm honest with you, I have pretty controversial opinions on this that might stray from the general zeitgeist in eating disorder recovery, because with the theme of this entire podcast, I don't think anything is black and white. I don't think there's one right way to recover. I don't think there's one right way to be in recovery or recovered. So if you're ready for it, I have a hot take to provide you with. At the core, I don't think that there is even a right answer to the question, is full recovery possible? I could say yes, and I could say no, because really I do believe that the truth of that is different for every individual. While we all share common threads when we go through something like an eating disorder, as evidenced by all of you commenting on some of the more vulnerable things I post on Instagram. I hear a lot like, how do you know this? Like, are you in my head? Are you in my brain? It's like, no, but we have very similar brains. So yeah, we share a lot in common, but what leads us to where we are at in an eating disorder and in recovery is never the same person to person. We're all individuals. We have our own life paths. We have different forms of support that's accessible to us. We have different eating disorder rules for different reasons. And it would be kind of reductive to say, no, full recovery is not possible, or 100% yes, full recovery is possible. And I will explain. Full recovery is defined different ways for different people. I want to take you back to over 10 years ago when I was in eating disorder treatment. I was about 19 years old and in residential, very much in a sick state of mind. And to be honest, I was feeling extremely hopeless, thinking like there is this switch in my brain that I have flipped that can never be turned off. And I'm going to be wired like this forever. It's like, you can't tell me that any amount of talking about this or any amount of CBT or trauma dumping with a group, like none of that is going to change the fact that when I sit down to eat, I feel afraid. I feel guilty. I feel paralyzed. Like that's just never going to happen. Like maybe I'll be able to eat a little more. Maybe I'll be able to eat a little differently, but I didn't buy it. And I frankly didn't really want to. I was still pretty committed to my eating disorder. I was thinking, all right, I'm going to do what everybody says. I'm going to eat the friggin' food. And then I'm going to leave here and I'm going to get back to it because I'm right and they're wrong. When I was in this treatment center, I worked with a team of therapists who had also had eating disorders and recovered from them. That was kind of the conceit of this whole company. And many of you might know or have gone to this same treatment center. They're kind of massive now. And I'm forever grateful to them because they saved my life. But I met these recovered therapists and I was like, okay, tell me really, do you actually never have eating disorder thoughts? Like you say you're recovered. Do you ever think about restricting your food or over exercising? Do you ever have urges to binge? Like none of that ever comes up. You're telling me you never have a bad body image thought? And it's wild to think about now, but this particular therapist I talked to looked at me and said no. She said she never has a bad body image thought. She actually has better body image than most people. That's what she claimed, which maybe is true. And she said she never, ever, ever had the urge to restrict, ever. Two thoughts occurred to me. One was, well, it must have not been that bad. Like she must have not had it that bad if she's able to get to that point. And the other thought was, I want to believe you. I really wanted to believe her because the thought of having this brain invader in my mind for the rest of my life, controlling my food, controlling my body, if I really thought about that and let that reality in, I didn't want to live it. I had a difficult decision to make and I went back and forth several times. I was in treatment for a while, but I chose to believe it. If I do this, if I commit to recovery, if I do everything they tell me to do and I try my hardest and I journal my heart out and I try all the fear foods, I will do anything to not feel this way anymore if you promise it's possible. And they promised. Like as hard as it was to work on recovery, if I didn't believe that it was possible to fully recover, I don't know if I would have really worked for it the way that I did. I had to have some sort of hope that could motivate me towards that change. So it was actually really important that this therapist looked me straight in the eye and said, yes, I never have eating disorder thoughts. I never have bad body image. I was like, holy crap. I want that. I want that so bad. I want that more than anything. And so I committed. Now, talking about this today, I'm 30 years old. It's been like 11 years since then. I feel slightly differently about it, not upset about it, but just holding two different emotions at the same time. So flash forward, cue the healing montage. I'm doing residential. I'm doing PHP, which is partial hospitalization, essentially just day program where you go and do therapy all day long and eat food with people. Cue the hours of therapy, the crying over fear foods, like lying on the bathroom floor, all the messy. That happened. I worked so hard. I relapsed several times, up, down, up, down. You know how it goes, because someone told me it was possible to be free. And so I was willing to do anything. This is where it gets a little sinister, because fast forward 5 years and I was better. I was getting better. 2 years go by, it's better. 3 years go by, it's better. And that's with blips along the way. But it wasn't gone. Before we continue, I wanted to take a moment to let you know about something I created for people who want real, lasting eating disorder recovery, not just insight, but skills. My recovery skills training is a structured, step-by-step course designed to help you actually change how you relate to food, your body, and your overall identity. This is a 12-week course where you'll move through 12 modules that cover managing food guilt and fear, rebuilding body image without obsessing over it, finding and keeping motivation when recovery feels stuck, developing what I call internal leadership so the eating disorder no longer runs the show, creating a truly balanced relationship with exercise, learning how to take recovery into real life situations, meals out, holidays, social gatherings, and everyday stress. You'll also get a 100+ page workbook with practical exercises, reflection prompts, and tools you can return to again and again and again. Alongside the weekly lessons, the course includes audio meditations to help regulate your nervous system, recovery toolkits you can use in real time, scripts for boundary settings with family, friends, providers, and belief rewiring exercises to untangle food rules and diet culture programming. It's really got it all, and it's the course I needed when I was stuck in my eating disorder. Importantly, recovery skills training is meant to work with therapy, not replace it. It gives you the skills and the tools that you need so that in therapy, you can focus on the deeper healing. So you can use the code PODCAST for a listener-only discount of $57 off this course. You'll find the link in the show notes or the link in my bio on Instagram. All right, let's get back to the episode. I reached that point about 5 years in where I was still working with my therapist. I no longer worked with a dietitian. I was eating pretty normally, still following my structure of 3 meals, 3 snacks. There weren't really foods that I was afraid of anymore, but it wasn't gone. I was like, hello, it's been 5 years. What's happening here? Am I not doing it right? That's what the inner dialogue started to become. And that's what I mean by here's where it gets sinister. It kept feeling better, but it never completely went away. So my hypercritical, perfectionistic brain grasped onto that and said, you were doing it wrong. You must be doing it wrong. If you were doing it right, you would be where that therapist is. And at this point in time, I was in grad school, freshly in grad school to become a therapist. So I was like, I'm a fraud. I still have eating disorder thoughts and I want to become an eating disorder therapist. That's not good. If you're a perfectionist, and I imagine many of you are if you're listening to this, you know that when things don't go according to plan, you don't really consider the outside circumstances that led it to not going according to that plan. You don't really think about factors outside of you that are out of your control. You blame yourself. And then you say, you just need to work harder, control more, do better. And that's what I thought. I was like, okay, if after all this time, it's still not gone, then I have to be doing something wrong. And then it went a step deeper where my eating disorder voice would speak back to me and say, like, look, you failed at your eating disorder and you failed at recovery. You just failed, period. So you should probably come back to the eating disorder. Like, you could do that if you hadn't given up. It was that really awful, mean voice. You guys know the one. So this was this like off and on dialogue for probably a couple years. I didn't give up. I kept going with my recovery and things were status quo. That voice got quieter and quieter, but I still felt like I was doing something wrong because I wasn't like living with no eating disorder brain, as this one therapist told me should happen. Granted, she didn't tell me it should happen. She just said that that was her experience, but I took it to mean that's what should happen. So 5 years ago, I had my first job at an eating disorder treatment facility. Dream job. I was so excited. It was my first job out of grad school. I was working with incredible clients. And if any of you are out there that worked with me at that place, I love you. And I just hope you're doing well. But during this job, one night I came home and I just started absolutely crashing out to my husband because I was like, I'm a total fraud. I'm telling these girls that recovery is possible. And I'm sitting here with an eating disorder yelling at me in my brain still. Granted, not all the time, but it's still there. And I was like, why am I not better? Why am I not better? I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to. Why am I not better? Whew, it's making me heated. Like I was eating, I could eat anything. I could go days without exercising. I didn't ever weigh myself, but I still cared deeply about my weight. I still had that voice in my head ringing the alarms sometimes after I had a food that was outside the realm of what my eating disorder would consider as okay. And my husband, who comes from an addiction background, he is in recovery from drug addiction and works also in mental health on the drug and alcohol abuse side. He looked at me and said, I wish no one had ever promised you that full recovery is possible because you are doing amazing and you're not giving yourself any credit for that. Think about where you were and where you are now and the life you're able to live now that you never could have lived back then. How can you tell me that's not you being recovered? He said, you can't be proud of yourself because you have this unrealistic expectation that one day you're going to wake up and be completely free of any eating disorder thoughts. And then he asked me, if that day never comes, could you still be happy? And that really changed a lot for me because that's when I realized being recovered is not deleting the eating disorder from your brain, at least not for me. For me, it's in hearing the eating disorder thoughts and saying, yeah, you're stupid. It's eating the food that you used to feel guilty about, maybe still having little bits and pieces of guilt popping up and going, yeah, whatever, I don't care. It's in not weighing yourself. It's in not body checking. It's in living your life and valuing things beyond weight and beyond food and beyond body so much more than anything that the eating disorder tells you. And when I finally let go of the expectation that someday I am not going to have a single eating disorder thought ever again, I'm not going to have any bad body image ever again, when I let that go, it gave me the freedom that I was actually looking for, which was, oh, I'm good. I can stop being so hard on myself and just enjoy my life. And ironically, my eating disorder voice got quieter because I wasn't pushing up against it so much. I think, and this is a topic for another episode, but my perfectionism and my eating disorder are so closely tied that sometimes they become the same part. And I think that's what was happening here. The more that I fed my perfectionism, the more my eating disorder strengthened. And so when I let go of the reins around perfectionism in recovery, I actually stepped more fully into my recovered self. When those eating disorder thoughts popped up, I didn't give them as much attention. Instead of saying, dang it, why is this happening again? I just thought, whatever, and moved on. I was able to pay less attention to those thoughts because I then realized it didn't mean I was failing. And the other part of this is when I stopped beating myself up for those moments that my eating disorder did get triggered, I actually was able to confront the triggers without any shame. Before, when a trigger would come up, I'd just get mad at it that I should be able to handle this. When I stopped expecting that of myself, I was then able to say, oh, that triggered me. Let me think about why. What do I need right now? And move through it. That's recovery. Beating yourself up for being triggered is perfectionism. I also felt this need back then to pretend that those feelings weren't there. So I really just got angry when I was triggered, pushed it under the rug, and pretended like it wasn't happening because I thought it should be better and I should be better. That's not healing. So, this long winded story is to say that here I am, 30 years old. Am I fully recovered? I don't think I would say yes. I think I would say, no, I'm not fully recovered. And that's kind of why I named this podcast Recovered Ish, because the ish, heavy on the ish, heavy on the ish, always. I am the most recovered I've ever been, and I'm still not perfect. But that's recovery. Do you get it? I'm the most recovered I've ever been. I'm not perfect. I still have some eating disorder thoughts. They really don't bother me. I have bad body image days. So does everyone else in the world. I mean, look at this stupid thin epidemic we're going through. Who wouldn't? I'm human because of that. That doesn't make me a failure at recovery. Here's what I want you to think about now. Recovery can really only be defined personally. Your definition is going to be different than mine. So if you listened to this and you related to some parts, didn't relate to others, that's totally okay. It doesn't mean you're not recovered. It doesn't mean you're not in recovery. You are allowed to define what recovery means to you. If you've had an eating disorder, you know that comparison is the worst thing for us. And that's the last thing I would ever want you to do listening to my story. The truth is, you cannot compare your eating disorder to anyone else's or your recovery to anyone else's. It's not a fair comparison. Everyone has unique circumstances. And that's why it's really important to just understand for you, what is recovery? What is that life that you dream of on the other side of this? Something I've been thinking about a lot lately is the way that as humans, we are hardwired for narrative. You might hear me talking about this a lot. I am a narrative therapist. I believe we're hardwired to think about and create meaning from our life via the stories that we tell, which is why I think podcasts are so powerful. I think sometimes that is harmful though, because we think about beginning, middle, end. And really, as human beings and through the life process, we are always in process. We are always developing. We're always changing. We're dynamic. We're completely dynamic. And so, if personal evolution is accepted, why isn't always being in recovery accepted? Why is that a taboo? I really think it is a taboo because I feel nervous saying this, that I don't know if being recovered, period, is a thing for everyone. But I actually feel really empowered by the idea that I am always changing, I am always growing, and my recovery is a part of that. We all know that recovery doesn't happen in a linear fashion. There's not a beginning, middle, end. And you would never catch someone talking about personal growth in that way. Like, this happened, then this happened, and then I became the best version of myself ever, the end. Like, no, we have different realizations about ourselves that change the way that we see the world and change our identity. And that's a milestone moment. And then another thing happens in life and that changes again. And like, that's the beauty of being alive. We're always changing, life changes, support changes. And with every change, we move deeper and deeper into the person that we're meant to be. Recovery is a part of that ever evolving life journey. And actually, I feel like that frame of thinking really protects my recovery because I never let my guard down. Like, I know that I will never be someone that can go on a diet. I will never be someone that can rigidly track anything related to my health. I could never be someone who weighs myself regularly, ever. I mean, even to this day, weighing myself at the doctor's, I won't do that. I will not do that. I've seen my weight accidentally. It's been fine. I've survived it. A conversation for another day. But I can't do that. That would be so toxic for me. I think if I thought I was recovered and the eating disorder had magically been exorcised from my body, maybe I would think, oh, it wouldn't be so bad to try intermittent fasting. No, I can never do that. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I know these things about myself and my personality. And if I was recovered and thought that those would be non issues for me or should be non issues for me, I think that would put me at risk. I think that would make me naive. I know that I'm someone that is drawn to discipline, that is drawn to structure and rigidity, and in the wrong scenario and funneled into the wrong source, that can get out of hand and be super, super damaging. And that, while not an eating disorder, that's a part of my personality, I know makes me susceptible and probably always will. Okay, I have a couple questions for you that might help you to consider your own frame around what full recovery is. First question, what if the goal wasn't to silence the eating disorder voice? What if the goal was just to get louder than the eating disorder voice? That was everything in my recovery and still is. My authentic self, my true voice is so much louder than the eating disorder could ever be at this point. Maybe the eating disorder voice is still there, but so is the anxiety voice that I have that worries about things. So is the existential part of me that wonders about the meaning of life and sometimes causes me to crash out a little bit about that. Yeah, those parts are there. But the part of me that is committed to living and is committed to my values is the loudest part of me, and she runs the show. What if that's recovery? That seems pretty darn good. Number 2, what if recovery isn't linear because you aren't linear? What if it's not human nature to be linear? And what if the idea of achieving recovered, period, actually feeds the very same part of you that the eating disorder feeds on? Do you know what I'm saying? The part of you that is so committed to achieving a goal, that is so committed to the outcome. Isn't that the very same part of us that likes numbers and that likes meeting weights and likes tracking things to achieve a certain goal? Doesn't that sound eerily similar to the way that many of us think about recovery? I should be better by now. I should be pushing more. I should be X, Y, and Z. Why am I not healed yet? What am I doing wrong? Aren't all of those the same thoughts that we have in our eating disorders? That's scary. How similar. So isn't recovery easing up on that? Isn't recovery accepting the messy and accepting the nonlinear and accepting that we might always be in process and that's fine? I'm getting fired up about this. Okay, I want to take a step back because for all the criticism that I do have over the idea of being recovered, period, or full recovery maybe not being possible for every person, I do want to say that if that therapist back in treatment had not told me that full recovery was possible, I don't think I would have worked as hard as I did to get to this point. I think I needed that sense of hope to push me forward. Because if I thought that it wasn't ever going to happen, I really don't think I would have committed to the process. At that point, I had to believe that recovery was possible. If I thought that I'd be stuck with that evil voice in my brain forever, I think I would have given up a long time ago. It would have crushed me. It would have crushed my hope. And now, 10 years later, am I fully recovered? No. But it's actually such a relief to stop trying so hard. So like I said, it's a mixed bag. Do I think full recovery is possible? Yes. And I think that it has to be personally defined. For some people, like that therapist I met, for her, she does not have eating disorder thoughts anymore. That happens for some people. I hear about it all the time. It sounds amazing. And I still hold out hope that someday that'll happen for me because I'm still working on it. I'm still in process. But does that mean that I failed? No. I am so comfortable sitting in the ish area of all of it, sitting in the process. I'm so comfortable not being perfect. Well, maybe that's not true. I'm okay with it. I accept it. I hold hope for the day that my eating disorder shuts up completely. And for now, I'm so proud that my values and who I truly am are so much louder than that eating disorder voice. I could live a happy life right here, right now, in this space. And if that's what full recovery is for me, then damn, I'm cool with it. I am. Even though my ed voice isn't silent, my true self is so much louder that it actually doesn't even matter. I don't need to be perfect to be happy. And I mean, isn't that the lesson? Isn't that what recovery teaches us after all? Well, okay. I feel like I just rambled, but I hope some of this made sense. And I hope, if it ruffles your feathers a little bit, I would love to hear your discourse too, because this is a conversation. Like I'm putting these episodes out. I hope to provide some help, hope to provide some comfort and direction, but I also want to know your experiences. I don't want this to be a me talking at you. I'd love to hear from you too. I'd love to hear requests that you have for future episodes, topics that you would love for me to cover. If you're tuning into episode 1, I am so grateful that you're here. This really is a passion for me, talking about this and talking about it imperfectly. Here's the thing that I want you to walk away with. Recovery is possible, not because your eating disorder disappears, but because your true self finally shows up. Thanks for being here, you guys. I'm so excited about this next chapter of the Recover with Chloe brand and the Recovered-ish podcast. If you feel like you're recovered-ish, please leave a comment down below. I would love for you to give this podcast a review wherever you're listening, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Throw me some stars. I would love to get this message out to more people. Leave a comment down below on YouTube if you have thoughts that you want to add to the conversation, and maybe even share this with one of your fellow recovery friends that could use another voice for good in their life. If you subscribe, you will get notified of new episodes that will be dropping every Wednesday. And next week, we have an especially juicy one where I will be sharing my eating disorder story, the version that I have never posted about online. I'm a little scared. It's pretty vulnerable. I love you guys. Tune in next week. And thank you for joining me on the Recovered-ish podcast.